Hey everyone, I hope you haven't been waiting with bated breath because you'd be suffocated by now, but we are back after a 2 month hiatus. This is the We Talk Politics podcast. As always, I am co host Corey Tanisoff, joined by my buddy Gerald Mendoza. And boy, do we have a lot to cover. If you thought 2020's first couple months were rough, then you were in for a huge surprise with 2021. Now, because we've been gone so long, we're going to start from the very beginning and then work our way up to the present. And then we're still going to cover some new events. So don't you worry about that. But, Gerald, how have you been?
I've been all right. Yeah, we've definitely had a lot of stuff going on in the world around us. So very excited to get back onto the politics track. It's been a while, but yeah, definitely a lot going on.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, for any of you guys who are viewers of this podcast and the other one, the We Talk Sports podcast, we will have another one coming out later this week in which we're going to have it formatted a little differently. But, don't worry, you're still going to get your same amount of entertainment. But I think that we should start off this podcast on a date that should sound familiar to you, Gerald. What does January 6th mean to you?
January 6th sounds like one of those other bullet points that's going to come up in history books 20 years from now, unless they're written by Mississippi. Yeah.
And this recap, by the way, sorry to interrupt you, Gerald. This recap is for anybody who has been living under a rock for the last 2 months and hasn't gotten a chance to get to any mainstream news. However, we're here to help you in case you've been in a 2-month-long coma. This will only take probably 15, 20 minutes. Gerald,
exactly.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, definitely. The 6th of January is now synonymous with, I would say, a culmination of a lot of very heated rhetoric from a lot of different people in a lot of high places, which then led to, let's call it an incendiary event that happened at the grounds and inside the Capitol building that I honestly was not expecting. I was watching live coverage of what should have been the end of the election process, by which the state delegates and representatives all present their cases and their electoral votes to Congress to be approved in a joint session of Congress. There was one protest of the certification that had started its process of debate for 2 hours, I believe, and the Senate would have voted on whether or not to accept or deny certain parts of the vote and things of that nature. In the middle of that process is when we started getting inklings of disturbance in the Capitol. And I was watching the news coverage, and I was saying there was definitely some people who got into the Capitol making noise, and you could hear them inside the chamber. At first, they were just shouting and protesting. I honestly, personally, did not think too much of it. I thought, all right, a couple of visitors got in, and they decided to try to, make their voices heard with their disapproval of the process, which then snowballed into a full-on breaking and entering into the Capitol building, and we'll call it a lot of property damage, and just it was a serious situation that I had not expected to see inside our Capitol building, with protesters and very malintentioned people storming the Capitol, getting inside, trying to do harm to many of our elected officials and or government papers and property. A lot of them live streaming things or taking pictures of themselves and posting them on social media. Just a lot of commotion. Not a very appealing situation, obviously. And for the most part, I was taken aback at the whole situation. And, I don't know what else there is more to say about it that hasn't already been said, but I would say definitely took me by surprise. was quite shocked at the lengths that certain people went to try to, you know, change the election process and finalization of that process. Lack of security that the Capitol had been under in that moment, and they were not ready for that type of influx of people on the grounds that were willing to fight tooth and nail with the notably smaller police force that was on the Capitol grounds of the Capitol Police. But all in all, I'm not going to say, this is the darkest day of the 21st century. I feel like that's a bit of exaggeration and hyperbole, but it's definitely by far this decade is going to be one of the most important moments in the history of this upcoming decade, even though we just started. I have a hard time seeing anything taking much more relevance and attention and effect on our day-to-day process and the political process than this particular event.
I agree with you on that. And I three big takeaways from the events on January 6th was the first one is that this was directly a result of Donald Trump's incendiary rhetoric that he consistently used to say, even before the election happened, that there's election fraud, there's election fraud. If I lose, it's because, they're lying. The system's against me. It's the same system that got you in 2016. Calm down. And everything resultant of that is it's blood on his hands. The second takeaway that I had was that the United States is not, our capital. If we're going to go by intelligence, there should have been a warning. And I've read that there was some intelligence on it, but they didn't act on it. I think that we need to be more focused on acting on that. If an event like that should happen, we should be the first people to know. We should be the first person, like the first party to react to it and not have to learn about it through Twitter and CNN. And the third takeaway I have is more of a ironic one. And it's for all of the people who are like anti-mask during this pandemic. They still were anti-mask while they were breaching the Capitol. A bank robber doesn't go into a bank without a mask. A bank robber doesn't go into a gas station robber doesn't go into a bank or into a gas station without a disguise on or something. You're going to commit a federal crime of treason and not wear a mask, even though everybody else in the world is wearing masks.
And that was the point I was trying to make about the about people posting this on social media and live streaming this and all that. I'm like, yeah, power to the people. I'm like, you're
going to be in prison, buddy.
And some of them already are. Like, this guy who was waving at the camera, full face, not even trying to hide, very proud of stealing the podium.
Yeah, the dude, I was thinking the same guy, the guy who looks like Chip Gaines from HGTV, just stealing a podium. Just calling out of there. Hey, it's like, hey. Like, tell that to the warden, man. What are you in for? Oh, I killed 18 people. What are you in for? I stole a podium. Like, dude, come on, man. That's it's ridiculous. Like, I can't.
And if anybody wore anything if you
wore a mask, a cloth mask or a surgical mask, the one that everybody's wearing when you go to a Food Lion or a 7-Eleven, they would not know.
Recognition gets messed up. Yeah,
they wouldn't know who he is.
And if people came in like trying to dress differently, it wasn't to disguise themselves or hide. It was definitely to stand out. Like this guy who came in,
the guy who came in wearing a fur, hat with like a skull on top
and the horns on, the horns sticking out and everything. Like, it's a disguise, but we definitely know who that is now.
But the number one thing that I hope is, I'm very patriotic, and I think that whatever these people did is an insult to America. And, I don't care if they were a meme on Twitter or whatever. I think if you were in there, you got to get behind bars real quick, because that is not good. It's not a good look on you wearing orange. So the next topic of our conversation, speaking of orange, is the second impeachment of Donald Trump, which came as a direct resultant of this January 6th insurrection. Gerald, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I'm not gonna say I was necessarily surprised. Um, Control is still maintaining control of the House, with a little bit less power on the Democratic side, but still in control. Um, I couldn't see it not happening. I would be more surprised if the Democrats had not decided to pursue another impeachment, knowing that they already passed the first one. Seems like a much more, I would say, egregious dereliction of duty, and yeah, high crimes and misdemeanors. Definitely inciting an insurrection falls under that. And like,
If
I
Bill Clinton was impeached
for
because
getting head from a Jewish girl.
for getting ahead in the Oval Office, then creating an insurrection that caused lives to be lost and property to be damaged
On the grounds of the
in a
Capitol.
federal office, not just a federal building, the United States Capitol, one of the most iconic sites in the world, then I think that's high crimes.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think you
And
even put misdemeanors in there.
No, definitely not. I would say, later in the trial, which we'll get to in a second, but I just want to mention this. Later in the trial, the defense by one of the Republican senators, not the defense team, but the senator, saying this was not incited by President Donald Trump because it had been planned beforehand.
We'll get to more of that in the segment after next.
Right.
To capture this next one real quick, because we do want to run through this, and then we're going to cover that in the trial of our 45th president of the United States. The inauguration of the 46th president of the United States could not have come quicker.
Right.
It was the inauguration of Joe Biden and the swearing in of Joe Biden, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris, the first woman vice president, or the first woman to hold office in a executive position, being president or vice president.
Right, exactly.
My takeaway from the inauguration was his speech was very well laid out. He put together a very direct plan of what he intends to do for the first year of his campaign. We're going to see more in the State of the Union, and don't worry, we will cover that as soon as that comes.
Right,
but
exactly.
He covered it really well. I think the guests that they had on were very straight to the point with just enforcing the fact that, hey, we're not dividing anybody. Joe Biden made a point that I don't care if you voted for Donald Trump, if you voted for me, if you voted for anybody else, I will be the president for you. And I loved that. That was something that I completely resonated with. And I can find Joe Biden. I look forward to seeing his next 4 years in office. What were your takeaway? Oh, and I also appreciated how he didn't stand down the protesters or the movement that had just happened a few weeks prior, and still came out of his motorcade and walked his way up to the White House. That was one of the most strengthening United States president moments that I've seen, that I don't think gets talked about enough.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, due to multiple factors, the two biggest of which being the fact that we're still, at the time of inauguration and even now, still dealing with a massive problem with this pandemic continuing to spread. Numbers seem to start trending down, thankfully. We have 3 now viable and reasonable options for vaccine, and distribution seem to be picking up a lot better. Thank goodness. I feel like I can see the horizon, a light at the end of the tunnel with this virus. It's not going to be an easy road by any means, but I definitely see progress being made, and I'm happy to see that. To everyone who was involved, from the previous administration to this administration, to the scientists and doctors who've been working very hard, and everybody who was part of making this process as expeditious and expedient as possible. Good on them. We pulled things together as a country, and we got this done. And thankfully, I think we're starting to turn the corner for the better. But along with that, also with the situation that happened 2 weeks prior from Inauguration Day, um, and the situation in the Capitol, D.C., the area around the Capitol and the federal grounds were just completely shut down. So it was a very different feel of an inauguration, much different. You didn't see the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on the mall. You didn't see people lined up on the streets for the parade and all that. You didn't see the as many exhibitions or shows of ceremony. But I do appreciate the way they organized the inauguration ceremony. The joint congressional and Senate committee on the inauguration, I did think an excellent job of doing the best they could with the situation that was handed to them. And I thought it was a great idea to put the flags in the National Mall. The state flags and American flags and pillars of light and the surprise fireworks show at the end that I could hear from my house here in Bowie. Um, that was loud. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. um, but honestly, I think it was carried out very well, and I'm still thankful for the fact that even after the literal worst possible transition period that we could have had following our election, we still picked up the pieces, got together as a country, and said, "All right, let's get going, move on here," because it's time, and I'm appreciative of the fact that our nation prioritizes that process uh, above many things, and it shows that no matter how fractured this country does get, there is always an opportunity around the corner to reunite and then get back to work, which I think has been shown very well by the current administration and by, I think, the majority of the previous administration. Um, you know, President Trump very prominently not at the inauguration ceremony. I'll be honest,
I was going to bring that up as soon as you finished.
Yeah, not necessarily surprised by the fact that he wasn't there. Not part of his character at all to do something like that. It's just not in him to do that. But Vice President Mike Pence showing face in a very honorable, respectful, and graceful way to be there saying, I am here as, as the face of this administration saying, all right, it's time to get working as Americans, and no matter even the embittered nature of the one person who has a higher office than me, I'm still here to help the American people and the nation transition towards the next chapter in the country's history. So, props to Mike Pence for doing what he did during the inauguration and being graceful in defeat and in transition. And I think he knew that's what the country needed, and I think he did a really good job. And I think it bodes well for him his future political career as well, which we'll get into later.
Yep. I also wanted to say that Michelle and Barack Obama looked the absolute best they've ever looked. Just coming out. I was so glad to be like, oh my goodness.
I also like the fact that President Biden's granddaughters, all three of them, all of them had like monochrome outfits with like large coats and everything. It was bitterly cold, by the way. It was like wind chills of 20s. So like, and a little bit below, but they came in like a white, a beige, and a pink color, and I'm just like, I saw the thing online. I'm like, Joe Biden's granddaughter's really out here advertising for Neapolitan ice cream.
The best kind of ice cream, by the way.
Yeah, it is. It's the best of all three worlds.
It's the best flavor ice cream. A mint chocolate chip cookie dough, it's great, but Neapolitan, that's three flavors in one. Moving on to the next topic of our rundown, and the last topic of our rundown, but actually, I guess there's two more. I apologize for stressing this out. Is the impeachment trial. So, Donald Trump had been impeached already, and they ran an impeachment trial a little bit too short, only lasted really 2 days for something that could have been or should have been done for a few weeks. They cut it short, and word is because, we want everybody to be able to get home for Valentine's Day. Okay, can it, buddy? This is the future of America that we're dealing with. The trial ended up in a 55 to 45 vote to impeach President Donald Trump, and
to convict.
To convict, correct. To convict former President Trump. And it failed because you were 67. Was that what they were looking for?
67. You need a 67. You need a 2/3.
You needed 2/3. We saw 6 Republicans vote in favor of convicting former President Donald Trump, or then President Donald Trump, and we saw 1 Democrat vote against convicting then President Donald Trump. The thing that stuck out for me most there was watching the impeachment trial. The funniest thing that I saw was his own lawyers. One of them quit. Was like, I'm not doing this.
No, his initial team that he had set up a week before,
they left.
They all left. They all quit and resigned.
Right.
And Rudy Giuliani was then the backup head, and then they realized how terrible of an idea that was after the whole 4 seasons situation.
So my favorite moment was in the hearing, and one of his lawyers said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, this should not be tried in front of the Senate. This should be tried in a criminal court. This is a criminal issue. This should not be tried in front of the Senate. And that made me lose my mind. Because if I'm being like potentially about to be convicted and my lawyer says, no, this needs to be a criminal thing, I would immediately fire that person on the spot. That's like being in civil court and your guy going, no, I think this is a felony instead of a misdemeanor. We should try to, persecute him as such or prosecute him as such. It was wild.
Can't. And also the one Republican senator I want to mention also as well, who mentioned that he said this is, this was not technically incited by the president on January 6th because it had been planned beforehand.
Right.
This doesn't help your cause either. I'm like, I don't know. Honestly, not even morally or situation. I'm talking about politically. How you thought that was a good idea?
It's honestly ridiculous the way I look at it. Right. It took 2 days to do something where you could have easily built a case that would have made anybody who voted no look bad. But they decided not to, and I believe that I know the reason. I believe that they did not want to vote to prosecute because they feared for another January 6th, but with more up in arms. So if you were to impeach, you already did that. If you were to say that their, Lord and Savior 45 is guilty and charge him, then January 6th is going to look like a daydream. That's my belief. I think that there were too many scared senators who did not vote to convict just because of that factor. They knew that, okay, if we're faced with this, he's about to leave office, we're going to storm the Capitol. What would have happened if you would have voted to convict him? I think we would have seen another event like that. And I don't think it would have been as friendly.
I mean, they would, honestly, they were already not friendly to Vice President Mike Pence, who had said, I'm not going to break the law.
I have to give Mike Pence props. I know his history, and it's, shameful. But I think Mike Pence did a very, very good job as vice president of this country, bringing a good balance to the, I guess you could call it ineptitude or even the explosivity of 45. And you can look at that administration and think, I guess Mike Pence is kind of the reason that anything got done, anything of importance. And Mike Pence stood tall the entire time. And Mitch McConnell, he stood up a little bit, but he did also say, I think that, further action should be taken, but I'm still going to vote against it. That really made no sense at all to me. I feel like it means more to him.
Mitch McConnell's on his way out. It's time for new Republican Senate leadership. Honestly, I think this is his last term. He just got reelected for another 6 years. I don't think he's going to go for another 6 after this. Honestly,
I think that people have a really short, attention span, and I think that he might be back, but he is significantly aging. So I don't know if he will run again.
His I'm surprised his speech impediment hasn't gotten in the way at this point. Like, I feel bad for the Senate record keepers.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's. I would almost equate that to listening to Nancy Pelosi and having to take a record of that. Is the two people who are in charge of your democracy just can't speak anymore. They're just bad at it.
And that's not to say Joe Biden or President Trump were any good either.
No, President Trump was a mess with it, but President Biden, I have to give him props. He has overcome a speech disability, which he has gotten over and does, I would say, really well at good times during his speeches. So I'll commend him for that.
But there's also some notable gaffes that he said since being elected. Like,
no, well, not even since being elected. Like, any poor kid can do just as good as any white kid.
Any white kid.
Yeah, that's not a good look, you know. But with that, we're going to move on to our next little rundown of the Texas power grid. So for those who are not aware, Texas just had what we would call up here a minor snowstorm. But you have to remember that it is Texas, and they were not at all prepared for it. So, Gerald, do you think you can give a little rundown?
Yeah. The situation, like you just set up, is the fact that there was definitely, it wasn't just Texas. This was a very big winter system that affected a lot of states in the South. Along with Texas, there was Oklahoma, Arkansas, part of the Midwest like Missouri, Kansas, down around some parts of Colorado and New Mexico. This was a pretty significant system, and even though it had not hit Texas, I would say in an extreme manner, it did hit them hard in a way that they weren't expecting. So there wasn't as much road prep as there could have been, as well as system management definitely failed in certain aspects. The biggest thing I would say, the two biggest things that caught the attention of the national media, is the fact that there was that one night on Highway, I think it was Highway 10, where over 100 vehicles were involved in a massive pileup. Multiple people lost their lives in that situation. Brakes weren't working. They had not closed off the road in time, so there was an incredible amount of bad driving circumstances, and it did not bode well for the drivers on that highway. Multiple long haul trucks, SUVs, cars, all vehicles of all types. Very much I would say a disturbing scene, honestly, because there are videos of it. People on the other side of the highway taking a video, watching cars slam into each other at 50 to 60 miles an hour and not having enough capacity to brake because the roads weren't treated correctly. The second thing that caught people off guard, I would say, is the grid in Texas could not handle certain capacity of the amount of heat that was needed in the state in different areas due to the fact that because the forecast had changed so quickly and it affected more of Texas than anyone had expected, because how reliable is weather 100% of the time, but weather changes, and in this situation, the grid could not keep up with the demands of the people who needed the heat and the electricity and things of that nature, as well as the quality of houses were not always built the best because I would say there's an older age of housing in the state of Texas. All that put together made a really bad situation worse in the fact that there were people losing power or unable to access power, lights, or heat for an extended period of time, causing a massive disruption and emergency situation where, honestly, people were saying the only thing that they were being benefited by in the Texas area, in like Dallas area, in other parts of the state, more rural parts as well, suburban areas. The only thing the house was affording them was a roof, because the heat wasn't working, the lights weren't working, they didn't have gas or electricity to be able to cook anything. Um, so I mean, it was a very big mess, and I would say partially on that. Part of the cause of that would be the fact that Texas, for the most part, regulates itself in terms of their energy management and electricity management and gas management. Um, that means that most of the time they actually do benefit from it. I'm not going to lie. They've worked out a system that works for them overall most of the time. I would say 99% of the time it is a beneficial system and plan that they have. But in a situation like this, where they had miscalculated and not prepared accordingly, caused a massive malfunction. And honestly, it left a lot of people out high and dry, to the point where it was dangerous to their health. And the grid and the system did not live up to the expectations that the people of Texas needed. So, I mean, I have also a lot of friends and family in Texas, and they were like FaceTiming me or family, and or putting stuff on social media, and I could see definitely that they had said, day 2 or 3 without power, or not being able to go to the store. There's no power at the store, or supply chains are still backed up because the highways are closed and stuff like that. It was not a good situation to be in. And part of the problem on social media uh, that I saw was people making assumptions on both sides about certain things that I wouldn't say are completely inaccurate, but definitely not the root cause of the situation or problem, or at least not the whole story. People bending things ways to fit something that they want to prove, instead of looking at the whole set of facts and making a definitive, educated conclusion. I saw people saying, this is why you can't let states regulate themselves, because in situations like these, they fail miserably. Or people on the other side of the argument saying, this is part of the new energy deal. Some Texas lawmakers and representatives mentioned the Green New Deal as being part of the problem and as unsustainable in these types of situations. It was a whole mess. It was definitely a whole mess. But all in all, a bad situation for the state of Texas and their energy departments. They seem to be getting everything back together now, but not a good look, and definitely a lot of takeaways to take from that situation. But biggest one being, this was an energy management failure for a number of different reasons and sudden changes in the forecast. That's what I would say is the best way I can describe the situation.
I 100% agree with you there. I don't think there's anything left to cover on that. Um, Going into our more modern segment right here, which will wrap up the show with about 5 or 6 more things. Gerald, you have a topic that you'd like to discuss on here?
Yes. Now, I don't know if you know this, Corey.
I might.
How adept are you, or how well versed are you in the world of Latin American politics?
Not incredibly.
Not incredibly. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to point out, and there's a lot of setup for this. Yesterday, there were, you can call them the equivalent of midterm elections, congressional or parliamentary elections in El Salvador. With some, I would say, in any way you look at it, quite surprising results. Now, the background to this is, for the most part, for the last 40 years on or abouts, there have been 2 ruling parties in El Salvador, as is with most democratic systems. 2 parties always end up coming up being the top 2 dogs, right? Think here with the Democrats and Republicans. Think the UK with the Conservatives and Liberal Party. Anywhere else, red and blue usually political in essence, because there's almost always 2 parties that really dominate the political scene. A couple of years ago, there were presidential elections. Now they hold presidential elections like we do, independently from congressional elections. Like you can vote for your congressman separately from when you vote for your president. And this new president, a rather young guy, not part of either one of these ruling parties.
So
His name,
kind of like a Bernie Sanders type.
not even because it like he well yeah actually he did sort of come out of the liberal wing, but he is actually more aligned politically with a center conservative, more center right conservatives than with his liberal origins in the political world. But yeah, he did come out of like he used to be part of a party and then became independent and ran for president. And he was the first person since 1989 to become president, or since 1984 in El Salvador to become president that wasn't part of one of the two ruling parties in the country. Now he won a multi-president, like multi. It's not just two candidates and then you're good to go like it usually is here. Even though we have some token independents and third parties and all that, but
Calling tokens.
Sometimes they are. All right, I'm not talking necessarily about the libertarians.
Ron Paul,
the Greens, and all that. But the point is, he won a four-person race with 71% of the overall vote going in his favor, which I think
74%,
71%.
Golly.
Yeah, against all other candidates. So that's overall. That's not like 71% amongst the different Democrats. No, the country voted. 71% of the country voted for this guy. And which you will agree is an extremely impressive feat in any level of politics.
Well, even in America, winning an election by 71% is something to be wowed at.
That would translate to almost 400 to 500 electoral votes, depending on where you get them. Like
that's ridiculous.
That's a ridiculous amount of votes, right? So he definitely was someone who, because I'll say this, he was popular because he was different than the same two options that El Salvador has had for a long time, but that has also been amplified that over the last 40 years with these two ruling parties in place, there has been rampant, and I mean rampant corruption that has not ceased, which has caused mass migrations out of the nation, which has caused incredible problems with gang-related violence, dangerous city and living conditions, low standards of living, bad economic policies, you name it. This country had not been doing well for so many years because corrupt people in power kept on voting for the same two parties and making sure that they stayed there. Finally, a new option comes in, and the country overwhelmingly says, we're done with the old stuff, let's put someone new in. Now, this was just the presidential election, but he won with 71% of the vote, and since January of 2020, his approval rating has not dropped below 83%.
That's ridiculous.
Constantly, from independent, international, and national polls.
Wow. Yeah, that's even crazier.
He was given a 77% favorability rating on how he handled the nation's response to the pandemic. He was one of the first Latin American nations to shut it down like New Zealand. He has constantly, 83 is low for him. The first 4 or 5 months of his presidency, he never got below 93% approval rating. He's not gotten down 88% since September of last year. He has been ranked number 1 amongst the presidents of the Americas by the international community. And his most recent approval rating is a Gallup poll, National Gallup poll, on managing the pandemic. He was given a 91% approval rating.
Well, I don't believe that it's hard to beat Justin Trudeau for something, and I 100% don't believe that it's hard to beat Donald Trump for something when it comes to a presidential rating. But yeah, golly, that is a high number. And from my history knowledge of El Salvador is there was a mass migration out of El Salvador because of their crime rates, because of how, poverty stricken it had become in many major metropolitan areas, and people just started leaving. So getting new blood in there, it seems like it's helped.
I mean, I think it's helped massively. I think it's made a difference for the country. They're turning face and very much on the steps of a new beginning. And that was just the presidential election. So now, fast forward to yesterday. Yesterday was the congressional midterm election. Let's say your representatives, your mayors, your governors, all that fun stuff, like all the great stuff that.
How many of him, like his party, got put in?
Here's the thing. He ran under one party that leveraged him to point, just as that accepted him, because he was expelled from one of the two other parties for ideological differences.
Fun.
And he said, "All right, I'm gonna do this by myself." And so, what he did is once he was now president, he formed a new party. Formed a completely new party out of from the ground up. Formed a completely new party called the New Ideas Party.
How many New Ideas Party just got voted in?
I will say this. I'll preface it with this. The demographics for El Salvador in their parliament was here. Hold on. There's the two main parties. They're called Arena, which is a National Republican Party, and the FMLN, which is the Socialist Left Party, right? And there have been the two ruling parties for decades. Up until yesterday, Arena had 37 out of 84 seats, or about 41% of the congressional share. And then the FMLN had 24%, so about a quarter of the congressional seats. But they had enough to control whatever they wanted to between the two of them, pretending to be enemies, but definitely the corruption between them, linking them together to keep themselves as the ruling parties type of thing.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I know, right? His party that he started, because it was brand new, there was no representatives in Parliament or in their Congress that were part of his new party. He was at zero. And after yesterday, to the best of my knowledge, and they're still technically counting because it takes time to count things, he has now reached so far with about 76%, this is from the Washington Post as well, with about 76% of the ballots being counted on Monday, his new party, along with his original party that he ran under for the presidency, they have an alliance, smart guy, his alliance has a supermajority with 56 seats. Yeah.
So it went from having one guy as the president to
and no support in Congress,
and there was no majority party.
Yeah.
Right beforehand.
Right.
And now he's the president with a supermajority of that party. Golly.
Yeah, he has just catapulted himself into an incredible amount of freedom politically to work with now. I knew you would find that impressive. A little more background about him. I've not mentioned his name. If you had to take a guess at his name, what would his name be?
Cesar Chavez.
Not even close.
No, okay.
His name is Nayib Bukele.
Oh, how would I have guessed that?
That's the whole point. He is the son. I know. He is the son of. It said, according to the Times of Israel, Bukele's paternal grandparents were Palestinian Christians from Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and his maternal grandmother was a Catholic, and his maternal grandfather was Greek Orthodox. So as if you can cross as many lines as possible.
Yeah. And then also be running in South America.
Yeah, the nation of El Salvador. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Holy.
he uh he 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 ran his own company, like an online periodical uh, company. Um, at around 18 is when he started running his first company. So
Well,
he is business minded.
congratulations to him.
I think this is a good turn for the nation of El Salvador. Um, like I said, a brand new beginning for them, and the people have very clearly made their sense. And this is an approval of his job as the president, is what it is, because he had no support in Congress, and they were trying to mess with him the whole way through.
Yep.
Even yesterday during the election, they closed one of the biggest election centers because they said they ran out of ink for the ballots.
Oh, they ran
Font
out of
size.
the magenta and cyan
Exactly. Like, we need
printer
more
out
ink.
of. We need more magenta.
Yeah. So
Well,
they
it's
were trying to pull all the tricks in the book, but you can't mess with that type of majority in a country. And very much, I am excited to see what's new for this country that has had a long history of being let down by its leaders. I think this is a good step forward. I think it's going to be a brand new era for the people of this country who are tired of corruption and tired of people, just staying in power simply because they've been there the longest. You know, fills me with hope that something similar could happen here. I think it'd be immensely more difficult knowing the political landscape here. But hey, I mean, politically, if this isn't in political science major classes sometime in the near future, I
I
mean,
think it should be included. That's that.
yeah,
It's a master class on how to win friends and influence people. It's interesting that you said that he was from or he has roots all over, and
right.
especially you said where did you say his parents were from?
His paternal grandparents were Palestinian Christians.
Palestinian Christians. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you put that piece of the map on the board for it because that beautifully segues into our next piece of modern events, and that comes in Syria. So,
Right.
in
Yep.
case you didn't get enough of it for 8 years, uh, the 44th President Barack Obama launched. What was your joke, Gerald, that you said?
Um, it was more about Yemen, but it was about the Middle East in general. Yemen, home to 2.6 million people and 2.7 million missiles.
And if you could guess it, his former vice president took about a month before dropping his first missile strike in Syria. Now, am I against this? Yeah, on a personal level. Like, I don't think that we should be getting involved in all this. However, look at the fine print, and it seems to be a good part. Uh, there were multiple drone strikes sent in Syria against Iranian militant groups or Irani-backed militant groups that were taking footholds in the area. Uh, I believe that this opens the door to more military attacks, and I could see us possibly getting into more covert operations in the Middle East regarding our enemies across the pond. Gerald, what do you take away from this, if anything?
Um, I am not necessarily surprised. Um, I mean, I think when they back when President Obama started, the catalyst for or the impetus of what started the strikes and the operations in Syria was definitely the fact that ISIS had such a strong foothold in the area and they needed to be driven out, which I think was done pretty well by both our previous administration with President Trump and the administration prior, getting the ball rolling with President Obama. But that is also to say the fact doesn't change the fact that this is the U.S. being involved in Middle Eastern politics in a way that is now synonymous with our nation's current foreign policy. In terms of everything else, I mean, I'm also not surprised because at the fact that there were this many Iranian-backed militant groups in the area of Syria, considering the fact that near the end of his presidency, or not even near the end, but definitely at some point, President Trump decided to pull out troops, a significant portion of the troops in Syria, which I understand the sentiment, but also
Yeah, well, that came at his pull the troops out point of his campaign and tried to make a last minute push, which I do agree with on it. However, you are taking them out of regions where we do need to keep an eye out.
right, exactly. I mean, this is the same. I would say this is the same exact
Even though
thing.
they are self-created problems. We wouldn't have to
I
deal
know.
with this if we didn't
But
get in
listen,
there in the first place.
This is true, but that's already neither here nor there because it already happened. This is us saying we broke the vase, now we have to put it back together again.
Right. And saying, why did you break? Why are you having to put it back together? Yeah,
right, exactly. I mean, we did it in Iraq, we did it in Afghanistan in a way.
we did it in Libya.
We did it in Libya.
We did it in Syria. We did it in Sudan.
Now we're doing it in Syria again.
Yep. Now back to Syria.
I mean, I don't think it's gonna be anywhere where a president finally says we're pulling every single one of our troops out. We're not dealing with anything else in the middle of the world. The U.S. is and you might disagree with me on this. Personally, I don't believe the U.S. is ever not going to be involved in international politics to a point where boots are going to be on the ground somewhere.
That's why 2040 Stanislav Mendoza ticket, taking the troops out of everywhere, giving them a retirement budget, saying take care, buddy.
Exactly.
Have a good time. We're not dealing with other people's bull.
But yeah, also another thing I also said is the reactions on social media, half comical and also half semi-serious but uninformed. I would say the people reacting to the fact that definitely everyone thought President Biden during his campaign said, we're going to cancel student debt, declare environmental emergency to start working on climate change projects, and we're going to give everybody their $2,000 stimmy. But, yeah, none of those have happened, and we're bombing Syria now, and everybody seems to be up in arms about it. I get your personal viewpoint. Like, I understand if someone says, I don't believe on a personal level that this should be part of the U.S.'s job, because bombing a nation to hell and back doesn't always result in a brand new nation at the end.
No, you put a puppet in and they come back. Worse than before. Iraq, see Iraq, see Syria,
see Iran,
see Iran. Yeah, we'll see how well that.
But also if you're
that guy who the famous toppled picture is of, that guy Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
I wonder how he got there.
Right.
And that's only the Middle East. Look at our southern neighbors.
I was about to say, look at almost all of Latin American history after their independence.
Yep. Oh, we don't like that guy. We're going to kill him and put our own guy in. Oh, we don't like that guy either. Process repeats. Rinse, wash, repeat. Rinse, wash, repeat.
I mean, it's just if there's anything the CIA is good at, is definitely making sure.
Making sure they wash somebody, they rinse them, and then they repeat the process.
Exactly. But of the people, like I said, who were uninformed about something and thinking about like certain issues that the president has mentioned and whatnot, or certain campaign promises that haven't been completed. Not everything is just the president's decision unilaterally. That's not how our government works. Like, I'm sure if Joe Biden had the power, he would have signed an executive order that unilaterally overpowers everything and gives everybody their $2,000 stimulus check. But he has to cooperate with Congress and get things done on that front. Which, by the way, they also just passed another $1.9 trillion deal again.
Did it pass through both chambers?
It passed through the House. It's going to go to the Senate. But
the good thing, I would say, because I said it before many times, and I've said it, I'll say it now again. I think the best thing is you have a blue House, a red Senate, and at that point, it doesn't matter. And right now, we have a blue House, a half red, half blue Senate with a blue majority because of the
tiebreaker.
Yep, you got the Yep, exactly. You have the vice president, and then you have a blue president, which this is as close as you can get to it without having the real thing. So in this case, you actually get very good equality because these days nobody's 100% strictly following party lines unless you're a dinosaur boomer.
Not even the dinosaur boomer, but also these new progressive people who think unilateral policy change is
Yep.
going to happen, and you stick to your guns and sit on the floor until you get what you want. That is not the way politics or our government works. Listen, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Part of the confidence I have in Joe Biden as a president and as a leader of this nation is the fact that he is someone who is a politician and understands how DC works. No matter how much you think it's changing, it doesn't. It is still politics, and he knows how to run that gambit.
Yep.
So, I mean, am I necessarily surprised at the fact that because there are Iran-backed military groups in Syria, that a bombing needs to happen? Also, props to the president for still being the last 4 presidents for being presidents who decided they're still going to be the commander in chief to an extent. I would say you probably think presidents still have too much military power that isn't approved by Congress, but based on the gray areas of our Constitution that have been challenged and reaffirmed, I think, multiple times now, this is still technically part of the president's authority to make a move.
Well,
And I think a move was made.
I do agree. Now, I don't think even the president has. I would say, let me get this organized real quick.
Right, yeah.
The president has too much power in regards to military, based on what we saw in 2001 and 2002 with Bush Jr. We saw too much there. However, I do think that the president needs to be the guy who can pull the trigger on operations, as we saw with the Osama bin Laden op under the Obama administration, because if we're going to have a significant military output and a significant military action, it needs to be to somebody who can be held accountable, somebody who we voted for. I don't think that responsibility should fall onto a general who is promoted. I don't think it should fall onto a acting commander of a certain regiment. I think that it should be put onto the president because they are the commander in chief. Do I think that the restrictions on them doing things a certain way are a little wonky? Yes, I do. However, do I think that the necessary powers at B are instilled in the right person's hands, regardless of who's holding it? I do believe so.
Yeah, and again, the greater point I think I'm trying to make here is not even necessarily topic specific to the bombing in Syria, is the fact that, like I said, there's a lot of uninformed people. I mean, what is something we always say, especially when we told people time and time again to go out and vote.
We don't care who you vote for. I don't care if you vote for Donald Trump. I don't care if you vote for Joe Biden. Look it up. Learn for yourself. Don't watch, Fox News. Don't watch MSNBC to learn who you want to vote for. Do your own research.
Right. You said it. I think you said it almost perfectly yourself. Too many people these days are reading headlines and getting angry before they do any little bit of research or even reading the actual article.
It's headline mungers.
Yeah, and but there's also some other things that are up for scrutiny as well. They should be with elected officials, like the fact that, like we said, these children in, well, let's call them the detention centers at the border, the numbers have increased for a number of different reasons. And it's still a situation that has to be dealt with, but I've seen the jokes online, of the memes online, which I can always trust on the internet to at least find some level of humor in some any form of reality that we're living in. And it's President Trump's detention centers, and it's just like it's the typical pictures of bad conditions and holding conditions and all that for the people and the children and all that. And then the next picture is the exact same picture. It says detention centers for Biden, or like a holding centers for Biden, because that's what they call them now, I think.
Yep.
And it's the same exact picture with a couple of rainbow stickers on the side and say "All Lives Matter" or "Black Lives Matter" on the side. Like, it's let's be quite honest here. Humorous as it is, that is basically what we're dealing with in our world of politics. There are certain things that don't change, morally gray or bad as they may be. Politically, there's only so many ways to get things done. And right now, until the president has an actual viable solution to try to reunite most of these children with their parents and also try to manage the influx of people who are now coming in because of this new administration and power shift in the government that seems to be on the side that is more friendly with immigration, more so illegal immigration also, and many hours can be spent on that. We're now in a situation where this influx of people cannot be managed, and it's almost like, oh wait, it's almost like if the president would have managed his image better in the previous administration, you would have seen how much sense it made what he was doing to try to help people. And I get that it's hard to look past someone's attitude and character for them, their essence being someone who very blatantly says, I don't care what you think, I'm going to do what I do. Even if it's a good idea, if you don't endear yourself to the American people, it's going to look bad. But this does not look good at all either.
I 100% agree with you. We did see that he did strike an executive order to put in, no deportation. There were 100.
Right, no deportation for first 100 days.
And then it got struck down by a federal judge. So they
resumed
he can do. Right. So that's out of his hands. But what I'm not so much a fan of, and I understand the reasons why you keep people in these holding centers.
Right.
I understand the practical reasons behind it, but reskinning, if you paint a shit gold, what is it still? Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And so I believe that is what the Biden administration is doing with this exact matter, is they're painting it golden and they're sticking a couple of rainbow flags on it, slapping a BLM sticker on it and saying,
exactly. Yeah. I mean,
right. So the problem here is a matter of what can they do versus what did they want to do. And I think it's writing itself out. On another note right here, because I kind of want to just pour through this a little quicker right here.
Right, yeah.
So on an international level, back to the world scope of things, because the world exists beyond Maine to the north and Texas to the south, believe it or not. The United Nations is actually looking to launch an active, 2 different seated United Nations members are looking to seat an investigation into the possibility of Russia poisoning Putin's opposition member, Alexei Navalny. And this comes after Navalny had been poisoned and had made his recovery, came back into Russia, and was arrested on premises which you can guess what they were. I'll say that they were probably not legitimate. Another note coming with that, Gerald, here's my surprise to you. Do you know who else is assisting on this matter?
Donald J. Trump.
Due to the potential, alleged poisoning of opposition leader, the Biden administration is putting sanctions on Russia for indeterminate time. And that should be coming in the next week. So do you think that this investigation will take hold? Do you think it'll make it through the UN Security Council, of which, as you told me, Russia is already a member of? So how do you think that across? Do you think it's even going to get there?
I believe personally in this situation, for the nations that are involved, let's outline the big nations that are involved, because I believe the majority of nations in the UN would vote for this, like just in general. But of the 5 big permanent Security Council members, which are Russia, China, the great the UK, France, and the US. You're playing chess. Every single one of these people are playing chess. That's how they work. Let's be honest here. This politics is a strategy,
Yep.
and everyone's trying to figure out the best strategy for their country, whether you like it or not. Saying like, "Oh, this is a moral good," you can veil yourself under that a lot of times and make yourself look better than what you're actually doing. But in this situation, France will go along with it. They're allies with the U.S., not necessarily friends with Russia. Their president seems to be a lot more charismatic and people oriented, more populist, I would say, than any of the other nations that are around with their leadership and everything. And their ambassador would follow suit and probably say, okay, I'm for this, simply because the optics are so evidently clear, terribly, just bad, that um, the people are man, I lost a word. I would say the people would back up the decision by the French leadership and ambassadorship to investigate. In the UK, also, because they have dealt with Russian poisonings before, I would say that they'll be for it as well. China's the real wild card here,
Yep.
in that they need to figure out, okay, am I gonna be allying myself, or at least keeping good with China because we share such a long border and history of rivalry, or are we going to try to make a gamble, try to win out and become a better power where it's simply us and the US who matter in the world, putting Putin down and rearranging Russia for a little bit so that they can gain some ground as the emerging world power as they are. And excuse me one second, I'm going to put you full screen to hear
Sure
your
thing.
response.
Yeah, no doubt. Do your thing. So when I look at this, I see a few things. If you want to look at a little more backstory, you can feel free to just look up Alexei Navalny's name, and you will find more than enough information regarding his poisoning, his hospital, like when he was put in the hospital, and his arrests in Russia, as he is the main opposition leader to President Putin. I don't personally think that Russia can really do anything with him because they are now on a global scale. As opposed to any previous opposition leaders, you're going to see them fade into nowhere mysteriously. But this one now has made national news, and the fact that the United States has sanctioned Russia for this, I do believe that this will see United Nations investigation. Because
Yeah.
United States is, there's countries, every country has its own space at the table, but the United States is sitting front and forward in every matter. You've got guys like China, you've got guys like Russia, you've got guys like UK and France who are, they've got their placemats already set for the meeting. But the United States is the head of the table, and I don't see that changing. And because we've already sanctioned them under Biden's administration, I do see this taking a course of action in which Russia will find fault.
And it's not even, listen, this was not a U.S. operation where, U.S. scientists and espionage efforts were the ones that found the results of this situation. No, this was an international community that saw what happened and dealt with it. Germany had to treat the people this man in their hospital and get him back to health, determine what poison was used and that it was a Russian poison. And then they said, this is exactly what happened. This is our scientific research. And I think if there was ever a neutral point nation that could make this without being a political ploy, it would have had to have been Germany. Because Germany is a strong nation politically in the world that holds a lot of power in the Eastern Bloc as well as Western Europe, and has good relationships with all of these countries like the US, the UK, France, and all of them. They are a leader in science, industry, and engineering. They are manufacturing powerhouses. Their government is a very strong and seems to be a very well united front that doesn't have a lot of internal turmoil as much as other major nations do. So in essence, Germany finding this out and them and their scientists and their laboratories and their determination being the forefront of this investigation. If the U.S. can convince Germany to lead the charge, or not even convince them, they might already be thinking about it. But if Germany is the one leading the charge, the international community will see this is not a political ploy by the U.S. or by China to try to gain an upper hand against uh, the Russian presence in this world. This is a situation that needs to be dealt with for the sake of what Russia calls itself a democracy, and is very clearly, along with the multiple constitutional reforms that Vladimir Putin has already instituted in the last couple years, very clearly running towards a long rule of a president who is very much not interested in giving up his power.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that in the last 3 times he's been elected. Is he has 8 years he can do it in an off year, and then he puts in a puppet. So Putin's influence runs hard throughout the country, and there's no possibility of being an opposition leader because, as I said, the roots run deep, and he's got the entire government on his side. So I see no reason why he would want to surrender it. As I was taught by my high school politics and government teacher, rule number 1 of politics is stay in power. And there's no reason for Vladimir Putin to want to get rid of any of that power. We're going to move into another thing created at the rule number 1 of politics. This last week, there was CPAC, and among other speakers, if you want to go through and look at CPAC information, you can. It is essentially the Republicans' yearly meeting where they go over different party rules. They have different speakers. They have announcements. All this stuff. It's a convention for conservatives, and notably, at this year's CPAC, 45th President Donald Trump hinted at running again in 2024. Now, I think that this is very interesting, considering that he is in the bullseye of getting a censure put up against him on a federal level. Now, Gerald, if you could explain to people who don't know, what is a censure?
A censure, at least at a federal level, in a position as the highest position at president, a censure is, again, it would be a vote by most likely the Senate and or House or both, and would result in a number of consequences. And it says it's done by a body, a body's member. So censures could happen inside of a party. Censures could happen between parties, like we are seeing hinted at multiple times during the impeachment trial as an alternative. In a censure, can be done to anybody, and I would say one of the biggest catches or biggest situations or results or consequences of a censure that I've seen is the fact that if you are censured by the body, by the Senate, by the House, you have the potential to lose your ability to run for office. I mean, I don't know how well binding that is, considering censuring is not always is not necessarily mentioned in the Constitution directly. It's more of a quirk of the rules of how the Senate and House function, but it's still a legally binding, situation. But this, all of this being said, this means that should Congress make or pass a resolution that censures former President Donald J. Trump, it would mean that there's a possibility he is not able to run at all legally for the highest office again. Like, he would not be eligible because of this government attack on him. Now, I would say, there would be an incredible legal battle the likes of which would probably outperform either one of President Trump's impeachment trials in a way that would definitely continue the "let's make history 2021" trend that seems to be going on. But it's definitely, I think, an option that a lot of Republicans are considering to say, "Hey, I never voted to impeach him, but I did vote to condemn his actions that sparked the insurrection at the Capitol, along with a number of other things that he did in his administration and during his time in office that are seen as less than favorable or harmful to the nation." So I would say this is still in the annals of Congress. This is still being mulled over and worked around. It has bipartisan support in both chambers of Congress. It is something that would definitely be, at the very least, a hindrance to the former president's ability to try to run again in 2024.
No, I 100% agree with you. So I agree with all that. I think that if he is censured, which would be a little less of a risk, as I had already said, against the safety of America, than it would be to press charges against the former president. I think a censure might not be 100% terrible. I do think that by 2024, our former president will not be eligible to run for president, as he could be incarcerated. He could be a felon.
His tax information just got submitted to the or just was allowed to be submitted to the New York District Attorney's Office in the case that is going on there with his company has been going on for years. Definitely gotten a lot less coverage than any of the federal trials or federal proceedings that have been going on with President Trump and or his associates. But also a very, very important situation to keep an eye on is what the New York DA is going on with these Trump tax returns. And should they be released in actuality, not just snippets of a report that we all saw from that one New York Times report earlier last year. This is definitely those two situations: the Trump tax returns and the possibility of a censorship would definitely cause a whirlwind of possibilities for what is to come in the future, the leadership of this nation.
Well, I'm going to tell it like it is, and it kind of relates to something. You never see advertisements for microwaves, and you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes with this administration that we had last. So you might just not necessarily know all the things that Congress knows. It's that same kind of specter right there. So there's a chance that nothing happens on here. There's a chance it gets taken criminal. He has three awaited cases in front of him in New York State. So we could see whatever comes out of the bin at any time. I believe that right now that is going to take up our time. And before we go, I've got my trusty bottle of water here, or as the Brits say, a bottle of water. And speaking of the British, unfortunately, we have one mighty Prince Philip, in the hospital right now. Has been transferred to the second hospital where he is being treated, and we are hoping that he recovers.
Yeah, definitely. Prince Philip, 99 years old, turns 100 in June. Definitely a mainstay in the monarchy, as well as the Queen herself. Like, this has been an incredible run for both of them that's still going on. I believe the Queen is the longest reigning queen in the history of the world records, like in world records. Like, she has ruled for over, I think, closer to 70 years now in the UK. Has overseen the reconstruction of the nation after World War II. She has seen different types of scandals, different situations that she's had to deal with. But she has been a mainstay of the monarchy and of the world. I mean, I've never lived. My parents have never lived, and my grandparents have never lived in a world. Some of my grandparents have never lived in a world without Queen Elizabeth II, and she would be the first one to tell you her bedrock is Prince Philip, her husband, who has been there by her side the entire time. A very loving and very well mannered, very well uh, taken and popularized prince. He took a step back when technically he could have taken a step forward as a monarch. Like he could have just declared himself king once he married the queen and been the reigning monarch. But he was humble enough to let the queen keep the reins to the kingdom, but still do his duty to do whatever he could to make her life easier as much as possible. But all that being said, he has access to some of the best healthcare in the world. He has the support of the nation behind him, honestly, and I think he's going to pull through. I think he's going to end up doing well. I think he'll celebrate his 100th birthday in June, and he'll be much better. And hope to see him get better very soon.
Without a doubt. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a fun wrap up to this podcast as we do on the sports podcast. Now, if you want to catch that, you can catch that at We Talk Sports on YouTube or at We Talk Sports 20 on Twitter. And we will have a few of those actually upcoming in the next week. The individuals of myself, Gerald, and hopefully PJ will be taking the reins and making individual videos on news topics that are relevant to our teams and the leagues around. So, with that noted, as always, I've been Corey.
And I've been Gerald.
And we will see you next week.
All right. See you later, everybody.
Take it easy.